I built a tabletop bowling lane in my kitchen, and I spent the last year obsessed with figuring out how to reset pins automatically. Designing tiny parts like the scissors that lift standing pins was basically impossible, and that was only one of 10 parts I had to design to make this all work together. But if I was going to spend all this time building this bowling lane, it not only needed to be fun for me, but for anyone. This video is sponsored by SanDisk. Starting off with number 10, I knew I wanted the lane to fit on a kitchen table, which is about 5 feet long, and the ball needed some real weight, so I found this giant 2-inch marble, which is a perfect mini bowling ball size. At this scale, the lane would normally be 13 feet long, so I decided to shorten the lane to just 4 feet, and I knew I wanted to 3D print almost everything, but for the lane itself, I thought it'd be cool to use real wood as one long piece. A 1x10 inch board is almost the perfect width at this scale. Then I could screw it all together using threaded inserts and attach all my plastic parts to the wood. I'm not really a wood guy, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. For number 9, I think it'd be cool to have a deployable bumper system for those who aren't so skilled. Found this mechanism that can lock in place when pulled upwards. As the mechanism is lifted, a pin rides along a slanted edge until it locks into its top position. To release the mechanism, you pull a spring-loaded latch and fold it back down. I recreated my own version of the mechanism in SolidWorks to fit the scale of my bowling lane and printed out the parts for testing. I kept reiterating and adding small improvements with each print. It took me about 6 tries to get this perfect. Next up are the pins, and I printed them relative to the scale of my 2-inch marble bowling ball. After the pins fall off the lane, they need to fall onto a conveyor that moves them into the pin setter. These links are all the same component and nest within each other to create the conveyor chain. And now we're motorizing a conveyor chain to drive the pins and balls against a divider that separates the pins from the ball. I'm really liking the scale of the project so far. It's kind of like beer pong, except literally not at all, and is instead bowling. One thing that I noticed is that the pins are falling over a little too easily, and if I want this to be fun, it should be somewhat of a challenge. It's not as satisfying as hitting real pins, and I think they have to be heavier. Right now the pins are 100% solid, but I tried having the bottom solid and the top at 15% infill to lower the center of gravity, and it didn't really work. They fall over a bit too easily from vibration, so an easy fix is just to widen the base a little bit. I'm also going to print the base in TPU to increase the friction between the lane and the pins. PLA doesn't bond to TPU, but I can print them on top of each other with interlocking geometry. I also added tungsten weights to the pins to more closely control the weight and CG of the pin. I kept lowering the tungsten weight in the part until it was sturdy enough to resist small vibrations. However, I turned this knob a bit too far and actually made it worse. Notice how these pins sort of just tip over and are tightly fixed around the base of the pin. But in reality, the pin should be able to rotate mid-air to be able to make strikes easier. The pin should be about 1/4 the weight of the ball, and the CG should be about 1/3 the total height from the bottom of the pin. Spacing is also really important, as the ball should be able to almost fit between 2 pins, so I printed this guide to show me the spacing of the pins. This final version is much more accurate to reality, but the pins are still a little too resistant to wobbling. So I'm going to continue to iterate until they're perfect, but this is much better. As more of the project came together, my videos started getting a lot more attention. And then something really awesome happened. Real bowling technicians joined my Discord without me even asking. They helped explain how real pin setters work so I could solve the same problems at a small scale. If I was confused about anything, they even recorded videos of real machines and shared them with me. They didn't have to do any of this, they're just amazing people who love bowling and wanted to help. The pinwheel is next, and it's what catches pins after they move through the divider. This part raises the pins upwards to the rest of the pin setter. It has notches to perfectly hold the pin, and it's carefully designed so that a pin can fit in either orientation. Right now my pins sort of just fall out right after they turn 90 degrees, but I'll have to add what they call a kidney, which holds pins in place until they reach the top of the wheel. The pins also do a pretty good job of falling onto the wheel, but sometimes they miss, so I'll have to make a funnel to force them onto the pinwheel. I'm also using 2 different motors right now for the conveyor and the pinwheel, but it'd be nice to simplify and use one motor with the gear train. Since the conveyor belt rotational direction is perpendicular to the pinwheel direction, I incorporated some bevel gears to change the direction of motion. This was my first time printing bevel gears, and I don't know, it's interesting to learn about these things in school, but it's actually so cool to use them in practice. I also added these little pincer hands to the divider to funnel the pins into the pinwheel so they don't get stuck in the corners. I also worked on the pan, which catches the pins off the pinwheel and orients them butt downwards. This first version was too flat at the bottom and didn't allow for pins to slide. The pins were getting stuck, so we kept widening and lowering the shape of the pan until the pins have enough clearance to slide down smoothly. This one dude commented, "Do whatever your heart wants, mini bowling guy. Me and Ma will support whatever decision." I'm mini bowling guy? Who you calling mini?
I mean, come on, dude.
For the pin escalator, I made this print-in-place chain that can close on itself because of its flexible sides. And I'm going to use it to allow the same motor that controls the pinwheel on the conveyor to drive the pin escalator as well. The gear train works, which is cool, but the angle is a little too steep for the pins to climb with just friction. I iterated through a bunch of different versions of TPU rubber designs to increase friction and grab onto the pin. None of the rubber designs really worked that well, so I pivoted back to the sprocket and chain. The pin liked to do this dance where the head of the pin would bob on the pan and the body would rock along the chain. I thought some of the chain should include special links that could grab onto the pin. I tried a bunch of different shapes, but what worked best was the Monsters Inc. door design. Every 5 links includes a large wall structure to shove the pin, trapping it, and carrying it forward. After some good progress, I had to put the project on hold. I quite literally moved into a new apartment, got married, and went on a honeymoon all in a span of a few weeks, so that was chill and fun and dope as well. The honeymoon resort did have a bowling alley though, and I'm not sure they knew Mini Bowling Guy was in the building, alright? When I came back from my break, the project goals started to change. More and more people were commenting, I want to print and build this for myself. It still needed to be fun, but I had to build it for everyone. And that meant using common hardware and electronics that were easy to find. And most importantly, making as many parts 3D printed as possible so people wouldn't need to buy a bunch of extra pieces. The old conveyor belt used these metal toy axles to keep each link together, and some of them would pop out and brush up against the plastic. So I redesigned the links for the axles to be filament instead, with a tight press fit. This old pin design had expensive tungsten weights in them, and that was stupid. And after many impacts, the tungsten became loose inside the pin. So I redesigned these pins to be cheaper that use an M6 fastener through the bottom and a TPU rubber printed insert. These pins work much better and are way easier to make. And if I was going to put in all this work into redesigning it for other people, I might as well sell the files. So I decided in the end, the project will be listed on Kickstarter so I can offer discounts to early supporters. Okay, let's get back to some progress. The turret is what catches pins off of the pin escalator. This mechanism catches pins in their slots and then rotates to receive the next one. But the last pin is supposed to go through the center, so I built a tunnel that the pins can slide through. But the first few versions didn't catch the pin at the right angle, so I raised everything up to ease their travel path. Yes! Let's go! Now that we have a good way to catch the pins, we need a way to keep track of how many are in the system. So I installed an infrared sensor at the top of the conveyor that counts pins as they pass. But I needed a way to make sure the pins were aligned with their slots every time. So I used a magnetic sensor to give the mechanism a starting point so it knows exactly how much to turn. Now that we can catch all the pins, we need a way to drop all of them at the same time. I connected the turret to the spoons with a spring, adding a little bit of flexibility. The turret restricts the pins in the left and right, and the spoons prevents the pins from falling to the ground. So the spring allows them to travel together but slide apart to release all the pins. And so to do this automatically, I created a jammer plate that touches one of the branches that's a little bit longer, causing all the pins to release together. But how do we lower the pins onto the lane without them falling all over the place? The problem was that the pins in the turret were arranged in a circle, but we need them to form a triangle on the lane. So I made a system of funnels that catch the pins and move them into the correct triangular shape. That's so cool. Dude! To bring the pins downward, I installed motors on both sides that lift and lower the whole system. At first, the system wasn't very stable, but I thought about how to make it better and got an idea for my 3D printers. Notice how one rod keeps the platform steady so it doesn't wobble, and a second threaded rod moves it up and down. So I stole this idea to make my pin setter much more stable. But I wasn't sure how to release the pins onto the lane. So I made the layer with the funnels able to slide forward and backward to release the pins. However, my first design had round pegs for the pins to rest on, but the round pegs would get stuck inside the pins as the platform slides, which didn't work well. So I switched to wider square pegs with the slope that helped the pins slide off easily. This one guy commented, "This is a historic day in the world of 3D printed homemade tabletop bowling." I replied, "I hope I make it on the cover of 3D printed homemade tabletop bowling magazine. Maybe one day." Also, there's a fun bonus part to this project that brings it all together, but more on that later. Next up, number 4. The sweep is what pushes away pins that get knocked over. The sweep has to move backwards to clear all the pins, move forward to block new bowling balls, and then lift up so the game can continue. My friend Engineezy told me about this awesome website called motiongen.io that lets you draw a path, and it generates different mechanisms that follow that path. After a few tries, I found a design that actually worked. It cleared the pins and lifted up high enough with the a single motor. The sweep is working, but now we need to fix the pin jamming issue. So I designed a plastic spring that bends just a little bit when it hits a pin, but it's still strong enough to push it away when needed. It was tricky to get the right tension in the spring to make it work just right. The scissors are up next, and they're what pick up standing bowling pins so you can sweep away the ones that got knocked over. The scissor hooks grab the neck of the pin so they don't slide away. So for my mini bowling lane, I tried making a smaller version of those scissors to do the same job, which worked great with just one pair, but things got tricky when I tried to connect them all together, because the scissors don't just lift the pins, they also need to respect their positions. So if a pin is a little off center, the scissors should grab it where it is, not push it back to the middle. But I fixed this by allowing each pair of scissor hands to move on its own with an additional degree of freedom, so it could reach the pin no matter where it was. However, the pins kept slipping out, so I added little hooks to the scissor arms and printed soft rubber covers to help them grip better. Yeah, and if you're wondering, I actually did this all on my first try. Don't worry about that. It's alright, seriously. After getting the scissors to work, I decided to revisit the turret because sometimes the pins would get stuck. The ramp was too steep and the pins kept slipping, so I lowered it. But the pin pushers were hitting part of the machine, so I made a little cutout to let them slide through. I also realized that the turret walls don't have to be straight, so I sliced them at an angle so the conveyor could get closer. But after dropping pins in, the pushers were still getting stuck on top of the pins. But then I thought, what if the pins leaned a little instead of standing straight? And that worked really well. But when they landed, they still wobbled a little bit. So I added little seats to stop the pins from sliding around. Having the turret catch pins properly was probably the hardest part about this project. It's changes like these that I'm glad I went back to fix, but it was time consuming and doing this so often really started to get to me. Good engineering takes a lot of time, and I'm doing all of this while still having a full-time job. And then this project has gotten so popular that people decided that, hey, if you sold the files, I would be interested in buying them. If someone spends money on a product I designed, it has to be reliable. How can you have a super impressive large-scale project that also works all of the time? It doesn't. That's the answer. It doesn't. Or it takes forever. It might sound stupid, but I had 3 months of insomnia. I literally could not fall asleep because all I had was anxiety about this project. I couldn't get it off my mind. Every time you fix one problem, 5 new problems arise. It's endless. I was really feeling like I would be working on this project forever. The Kickstarter part of this project has probably tripled the amount of time it's taken me to make progress. But this was the path I chose to explore. So right now, all I could focus on is solving one problem at a time. Right now, the pins are dropping from too high because the deck can't go any lower. So I made the driving gear bigger, which helped the deck move lower and faster. And now that the deck can reach the lane, the pins can slide onto it. But the pins were sliding at an angle and started to wobble. When the pins fall through the cones, they land on a thin platform. So I made the platform thicker so the pins land straight. The pins were only supported on one side when pushed onto the lane, so I added a third, longer guide to stop the pins from wobbling. And that worked really well. But bowling isn't fun without knowing how well you're doing. So we need to figure out how to record the score of the game. I thought I could use these micro switches and force them against the top of the pins, but the switch could miss the pin if it wasn't perfectly centered. So I added a small pad to the switch to help it click regardless of where it's standing. But the pads were loosely attached and felt wobbly. So I made this whole system where the pin presses on a plunger that then hits the switch, and this just started to feel way too overcomplicated, and I still had to program a whole scoring system, which I really didn't want to do because I suck at programming, but I found this awesome program called ScoreMore that's made for at-home pin setters. But I felt stuck, and I wasn't sure how I could get it to talk to my pin setter properly. My only hope was if the creator of ScoreMore could work with me to help smooth things out. So I reached out to him, but that felt like a long shot. I thought it would be a few days, but Think Clever and Smart joined overnight and was instantly a massive help. He told me about a USB camera alternative to scoring that sounded way easier than switches. The camera looks for a white spot on top of each pin, and if a pin moves too much, it might not see it. But the pins stay in place because the rubber boot keeps them from sliding. The camera is much easier to set up, no soldering, and it's worked really well in my testing. This build is already so complicated, so using the camera makes everything simpler. Even though I spent 2 weeks designing the switch system, it helped me learn that the camera is the better choice overall. But the camera has to know when to check and record the score. To do that, I added a laser sensor. And when the ball breaks the beam, the pin setter starts the cycle and the camera checks the score. Alright, now let's put everything together. 10, and it all drops in the cones, and now if you're ready, it's gonna be put on the lane. Let's go! It actually works! Finally! Dude, this is so cool. Let's go. Let's go. Watch this. Watch this. 4 standing. That means I got 6. It's working. It's finally working. Yeah! This is sick. This win made me feel like I was actually close to finishing. But there were still a bunch of problems to fix. Before, the bumpers were too thick, so the gutters had to bend around them to line up at the end of the lane. Now, I built the curve of the gutter into the bumper, so it can sit closer to the lane. This means that the gutter stays straight when the bumpers are down, and when the bumpers are up, the ball just bounces off of them. I also modified the bumper so now it's fully 3D printed. The sliding deck sits on these posts on the scissor deck that allow it to slide back and forth, but because the scissor deck is so cramped, the posts had to be pretty thin, which meant that if the scissor deck met any resistance, the post would snap. So I made it more robust by adding these slider brackets to each corner of the sliding deck, and this worked much better. All of a sudden the sliding deck stopped working and was getting stuck. It was working fine, so that made me guess that a part may have broken or bent. And after checking, I saw the scissor deck had warped over time. It's a thin part with lots of holes so it can bend easily. I made the part thicker to make it stronger, and I aligned some mesh modifier ribs and the infill in the direction of bending to increase stiffness. The turret spring brings the spoons back pretty close to where they should be, but when pins drop in, the spoons could get out of line and cause a jam. To fix this, I added a magnet between the spring and the spoons. The spring does 90% of the work to return the spoons to the correct spot, but the magnet does the last 10% to make sure it's perfectly aligned every time. But something terrible happened. Oh my god, they're all gone.
What happened?
I was working on my design and my PC crashed and now all my files are corrupt.
Wait, didn't you back up all of your files?
Oh yeah. This video is sponsored by SanDisk. This is the SanDisk Extreme Pro Portable SSD. It has insane speeds of up to 3,800 megabytes per second read speed and 3,700 megabytes per second write speed. It has 4 terabytes of storage, so it's perfect for backing up all my files, whether it's design or video files. It's both shock and vibration resistant and can withstand a 6.5-foot drop. I'm often on the go, and I love to play video games on my laptop, but games these days have massive file sizes. That's why I always bring my portable SSD with me. My laptop hard drive is so small, I used to have to manually delete games that I wasn't playing just to save space. But now with the SanDisk Extreme Pro Portable SSD, I can carry all my favorite games already installed and ready to play. Get the SanDisk Extreme Pro Portable SSD today. Alright, that was a lot. So let's review. After the pins are swept back, they ride a conveyor belt into the pinwheel. The pinwheel lifts them up to the turnaround pan. This bathtub shape makes it so that regardless of if pins are head first or butt first, they always land butt downwards. From there, the pins move up the cross conveyor and into the turret one at a time. When the 10th pin is ready, it slides down the middle chute while all the pins drop into the transition cones. The deck then lowers the pins and slides them onto the lane, ready for the next throw. Now that the pinsetter is actually working, let's add some bonus details to make this thing insane. Man, what is that bonus part? I'm excited for that, huh? Anyways, let's figure out the ball return. After you throw the ball, it rides the conveyor with the knocked over pins. To separate pins from your balls, I added a divider. It has a gap tall enough for pins to slide under, but low enough to stop the ball. But once the ball is separated, it doesn't have enough momentum to reach the ball return, so I tilted the conveyor a little bit. And now the ball always rolls down towards the return. But what if I wanted to play at night? I added glowing NeoPixel strips along the lane and by the pins. I even 3D printed light covers with see-through plastic, so now we can play all throughout the night. Also, thanks for the support to these mini bowling Hall of Famers. My original wood board was pine, and as everyone knows, Danny's not a wood guy. I didn't know it was a softwood, and as pins were dropped on the lane throughout the project, it led to some dents in the plank. So while I was finishing the project, I decided to get a nicer oak plank. I sanded the plank smooth, painted on the lane markings, and then covered the plank in stain and polyurethane. But I had to get some rest because tomorrow was a big day. Tomorrow, I launched my Kickstarter to sell files to people who want to build their own lanes. I am exhausted. I didn't really sleep well last night. Too anxious about today. The entire time while building this, I kept asking myself, is anyone actually gonna buy this? I spent so much extra time making it polished for other people. I started to question, is this even worth it? Was all this effort and stress actually going to pay off? All right, we're live. But this was the moment we finally find out. It's been 5 minutes. We're at $2,000. I was blown away with the response and how many people bought files day one. We ended up doing over $25,000 in just 24 hours. It was at this moment that all my hard work finally felt worth it. This project took an entirely different shape than I initially intended, but my skills have grown so much over the past year and a half. I was way in over my head when I initially started, but you can overcome any challenge by working hard at it, even a little bit each day. Anything is possible. You can achieve any goal. Who's that? What's this? I did it! I finally did it!
I'm on the cover of 3D printed mini homemade tabletop bowling magazine.
The 3D printed mini homemade tabletop bowling magazine finally recognized my work. Now let's see if this thing is any fun.
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
Hey!
Don't hurt me no more.
No, so much power.
Hey! Just gonna pick up your other pins that you did knock down.
Wow, look at that. That's so nice.
Nice!
Let's spin on it just with.
What is right? What is wrong? Give me a sign. What is love?
This mini bowling lane isn't complete without cursed bowling animations.
No more. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
This was a lot of fun.
So, you ready to play some mini bowling?